The snow was falling so hard that night it looked like the sky itself was breaking apart. In the alley behind a rundown apartment complex on the south side of Chicago, a little girl no older than 7 lay curled against a dumpster, her thin coat doing nothing against the wind that cut like knives. Her lips were blue. Her dark curls were crusted with ice. One shoe was missing. Blood from a fresh cut on her forehead had frozen into a crimson line across her temple. She was barely breathing. Hours earlier, her step-aunt Carla had dragged her out of the apartment by one arm, screaming that she was done raising somebody else's mistake. The last thing the little girl remembered was Carla's fist, the taste of blood in her mouth, and then being shoved into the snow while the woman stalked away without looking back. Now the world was only white and pain and cold. Her name was Mia. And she was dying. That was when the black Maybach rolled past the mouth of the alley, slowed, and stopped. Alexander Harrington was 34, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America, the men who had turned a college side hustle in algorithmic trading into a fortune that rivaled old money dynasties. The press called him ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. He hadn't taken a day off in 8 years. He didn't believe in Christmas. He didn't believe in much of anything anymore. He was on his way to a midnight meeting with investors when his driver, Marcus, muttered, "Mr. Harrington, there's a child." Alexander glanced up from his phone. Through the blizzard, he saw the tiny, crumpled shape. "Stop the car." Marcus had worked for him for 6 years and had never heard that tone before. Not an order. Something closer to a plea. Alexander stepped out into the storm without a coat. The wind tore at his custom suit. He crossed the alley in 5 long strides and dropped to his knees in the snow beside her. Hey, sweetheart." His voice cracked the moment he touched her skin. She was ice. "Can you hear me?" Mia's eyes fluttered. Purple smudges under them. A bruise blooming across her cheekbone shaped like adult knuckles. Alexander scooped her up as gently as if she were made of glass. She weighed almost nothing. Her head fell against his chest, limp. "Hospital." "Now," he barked, already running back to the car. Marcus had the door open. The heated leather seats felt obscene against her frozen body. Alexander cradled her the entire way, rubbing her tiny hands between his, breathing warmth onto her fingers. He didn't care that blood was soaking into his white dress shirt. He didn't care that he was missing the most important meeting of the quarter. All he cared about was the faint, thready pulse under his thumb. "Stay with me, Mia," he whispered, not even knowing her name yet. "Just stay with me." At Chicago Memorial, the ER staff rushed her away on a gurney. Alexander stood in the hallway covered in snow and blood, staring at the doors they disappeared through. A social worker approached cautiously. "Sir, are you family?" "No," he said hoarsely. "I found her. In an alley. She was beaten. Left in the snow." His fists clenched so hard his knuckles went white. "Someone did this to her." The social worker's face went pale. "Do you know her name?" He shook his head. "They stabilized her. Hypothermia, concussion, fractured wrist, multiple contusions, malnourishment." The doctor's words blurred together after a while. Alexander stood outside the glass of the pediatric ICU for 6 straight hours, refusing to leave. When Mia finally opened her eyes 2 days later, the first thing she saw was a tall man asleep in the chair beside her bed, still wearing the same blood-stained shirt, his expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. She was terrified. She tried to shrink away, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Alexander woke instantly. Hey, it's okay. You're safe." He kept his voice soft, hands open where she could see them. "My name is Alex. I'm not going to hurt you. I promise." Mia stared at him with huge brown eyes that had seen too much. "What's your name, sweetheart?" She whispered something so faint he had to lean in. "Mia." "Mia," he repeated, like it was the most important word in the world. "That's a beautiful name." Over the next week, Alexander Harrington, who once closed 9-figure deals before breakfast, learned how to work a hospital Jell-O cup and how to braid a little girl's hair with clumsy fingers because the nurses were busy. He sat through nightmares at 3 a.m., letting her grip his hand until her knuckles stopped shaking. He read her The Princess and the Goblin until his voice gave out. Child Protective Services tried to tell him he couldn't stay involved. He was not family. He was not even a foster parent. He hired the best family law firm in the state the same day. The police found Carla 3 days later, drunk in a bar in Gary, Indiana. She claimed Mia had fallen down the stairs. The bruises on the child's body told a different story. Carla was arrested on felony child endangerment and aggravated battery. She never once asked about Mia. Alexander was in court every single day of the trial. Mia had no other family. Her mother had overdosed 2 years earlier. Her father was unknown. The system was ready to place her in emergency foster care. Alexander stood up in the courtroom the day the judge asked if anyone was willing to take temporary custody. I am. The judge looked at the billionaire in the $5,000 suit who hadn't left the little girl's side for 3 weeks. Mr. Harrington, do you understand this is not a publicity stunt? This is a traumatized child. Alexander met the judge's eyes. Your Honor, I have never been more serious about anything in my life. Temporary custody was granted that afternoon. He carried Mia out of the courtroom himself. She was still bandaged, still too quiet, but she wrapped her arms around his neck and didn't let go. His penthouse on Lakeshore Drive had never known crayons or stuffed animals or the sound of small feet running down marble hallways. Within a week it was transformed. He hired the best child therapist in the country. He learned the difference between dinosaurs. He thought they were all just big lizards before. He discovered that unicorns apparently came in every possible color, including glitter. But the nights were the hardest. Mia woke screaming from nightmares, convinced Carla was coming back. She would crawl into his bed shaking, and he would hold her until she fell asleep again, whispering over and over, "I've got you. You're safe. You're mine now." One night, 3 months after he brought her home, she asked in the smallest voice, "Are you going to leave me too?" Alexander felt something inside his chest crack wide open. He pulled her close. "Mia, listen to me. I will never leave you. Not ever. You are stuck with me for the rest of your life, okay? Pinky swear." He held out his pinky like she had taught him. She hooked her tiny one around his and finally smiled. A year later, on a warm spring day in Grant Park, Alexander Harrington adopted Mia Elizabeth Harrington in a quiet ceremony with only their closest people present. She wore a white dress with purple flowers in her hair. He cried so hard he couldn't finish his vows and had to start over twice. The tabloids went wild. Cold-hearted billionaire melts for abandoned girl. He didn't care. He framed the adoption decree and hung it in his office next to his Harvard diploma. 5 years after that night in the snow, Mia was 12, fearless on a skateboard, top of her class at the private school that once intimidated even Alexander. She still had faint scars, one on her forehead, one on her wrist, but they were just stories now. She told them herself when kids at school asked. She and Alex had a tradition every December. They drove to the south side, to the same alley where he found her. They left coats, blankets, hot meals, and toys for any child who might need them. Then they stood together in the snow, holding hands. Mia would always say the same thing, "You saved me." And Alex would always answer, "No, baby girl. You saved me." Because somewhere between Jell-O cups and bedtime stories and first days of school, Alexander Harrington had learned that all the money in the world meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. And Mia had learned that family isn't always the people who bring you into the world. Sometimes it's the person who refuses to let you leave it. Even when you're beaten, abandoned, and half frozen in the snow. Especially then.